I only went to the shed for my toolbox, but instead, a man crouched inside, eyes wide like a trapped animal. His shirt was half-buttoned, his shoes tossed on the floor. The air reeked of my wife's perfume, clinging to him like guilt itself. In my hand, the old padlock key trembled, suddenly heavier than iron. I slammed the door, turned the lock, and whispered through clenched teeth, "Your family should see this." What I hadn't decided yet was whether this secret would stay locked, or destroy everything. Backhand index pointing right. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where you're watching from right now. That morning began like any other, or at least it pretended to. The kettle hissed on the stove, filling the kitchen with a low whistle that usually comforted me. Sunlight broke through the curtains, falling across the table where I had set out 2 mugs. Mine, the chipped one with faded blue stripes, sat steaming with black coffee. The other, empty, waited for her. Waiting, like I always seem to do these days. I tried to hold on to the familiar rhythm, the soft hum of the radio, the scent of buttered toast, the squeak of the old kitchen chair as I shifted in it. But beneath the surface, everything felt different. I could sense it in the silence, the kind of silence that didn't rest, but pressed down on a man like weight on his chest. She came in late, her steps measured, her face pale from lack of sleep. Her hair was hastily tied back, her blouse crumpled in a way that didn't fit the time of day. I glanced at her once, then at the padlock key lying beside my mug. I hadn't meant to bring it in from the shed, but somehow I'd carried it inside, still clenched in my hand from last night. Now it rested there, ordinary metal against wood, but heavy with meaning. "You're up early," I said, my voice flat. "I had things to do," she muttered, not looking at me as she reached for a glass of water. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, as though my words weren't worth the effort. "Things?" I pressed gently, more out of instinct than suspicion. "At 3 a.m? Her hand froze halfway to her lips. She set the glass down, harder than necessary, and turned to face me. There was a coldness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "You don't need to know where I go," she said. The words cut clean. Not shouted, not even angry, just dismissive. That was worse. A man can weather anger, but dismissal hollows him out. I stared at her, jaw tightening. "So I don't even deserve an answer?" Her lips curled into something between a smirk and indifference. She didn't reply. Instead, she picked up her bag from the counter and slung it over her shoulder as if she had better places to be. The key sat between us, ignored by her, burning in my sight. I reached for it, turned it slowly in my fingers, its ridges biting into my skin. This wasn't just a piece of metal anymore. It had locked away something I couldn't yet face. I tried to anchor myself in memories, better days, when this kitchen held laughter. I remembered Martha, my late wife, humming as she cooked, the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting through the house. She had been warmth. Now this place felt cold, the walls thinner, the air heavier. She noticed my eyes on the key and narrowed her gaze. "What's that doing here?" she asked. "Just something I brought in by mistake," I answered, slipping it into my pocket. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't press further. Instead, she turned away, humming under her breath, an unfamiliar tune, sharp and tuneless, a sound that didn't belong in my home. The kettle had long stopped whistling, but its echo seemed to linger, high-pitched and grating. I lifted my mug, tasted the coffee, but even that felt bitterer than usual. My hand trembled slightly, though I tried to mask it. She left the room without another word, the door clicking softly behind her. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was a vacuum, pulling at every corner of my mind. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the untouched mug, the faint ring of condensation it left on the table. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that maybe I was just tired, still unsettled by last night's discovery in the shed. But deep down, I knew. A man knows when his home no longer belongs to him. I stood, carried my mug to the sink, and rinsed it slowly, letting the water run over my hands until it turned hot enough to sting. Pain was better than numbness. Pain reminded me I was still here. That's when I heard it, a faint vibration against the wood. I turned. On the counter, beneath a glossy magazine, her phone buzzed again and again, rattling softly. The sound was insistent, almost mocking, like a heartbeat that didn't belong in the room. I froze, staring at it. The screen lit up faintly under the pages, glowing like a secret begging to be uncovered. And in that moment, I realized, some doors weren't just locked, they were deliberately hidden. The house felt colder the next morning, though sunlight poured through the curtains as usual. I sat at the kitchen table, the padlock key in my pocket, rolling between my fingers. Every edge of it cut into my skin, a reminder of what I had locked away. I couldn't stop thinking about the buzzing phone under her magazine yesterday, glowing like an exposed nerve. She entered briskly, avoiding my eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence pressed against the walls until she broke it. "If you can't trust me," she said flatly, sliding a slice of toast onto a plate, "then maybe you should leave." The words landed heavier than any argument we'd had before. No anger, no heat, just cold dismissal. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. An ultimatum like that didn't require volume, it carried its own gravity. I looked up slowly, searching her face. "Leave my own house?" "Yes." She chewed a bite of toast as though she were discussing the weather. "Why stay if you're going to question everything I do?" My hands tightened around the key in my pocket until the ridges dug deep. "I built this house," I said quietly. "Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. And you want me to walk away from it because I asked where you were last night?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Maybe you should ask yourself why you feel the need to question me at all." That was the first cut. But the deeper one came hours later. Her sister arrived that afternoon, her perfume sweeping through the hall before her voice. She had always carried herself with an air of superiority, but today it was sharpened, directed squarely at me. "Well, well," she said loudly in the living room, glancing at her sister with a smirk. "I heard things aren't so smooth in paradise." My wife laughed softly, but her eyes flicked to me, cold, satisfied. I stayed in the doorway, silent, gripping the key. "You know," her sister continued, lowering her voice just enough to sting, "people talk. They say maybe he's getting paranoid. Maybe it's age catching up." I cleared my throat. "If people have something to say, they can say it to me." She turned, eyebrows arched. "Oh, come on. Don't be so sensitive. It's just concern. After all, a woman has her needs." The words hung in the air like smoke. My wife chuckled, not in protest, but in agreement. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just disrespect anymore, it was collusion. And worse, it wasn't staying within these walls. By evening, the ripple had reached the street. I stepped outside for air, the weight of the key like an anchor in my pocket. The neighborhood carried its usual sounds, children playing, a lawnmower droning, but the air felt different. Two women across the street fell silent as I passed, their eyes following me with pity poorly disguised as curiosity. Then one of them, a neighbor I'd known for years, leaned slightly closer. Her voice was meant for me, though she pretended otherwise. "I saw a man sneaking into your yard last night," she whispered, just loud enough. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. I stopped, my hand closing around the key so tightly I thought it might snap. She didn't meet my eyes. She simply turned, heading back inside with her grocery bag, leaving the words hanging between us like a shadow that wouldn't lift. I stood there, staring at my house, the home I had built, the walls I had painted with my own hands. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if it still belonged to me. The next morning, the mail came late, a bundle of envelopes stuffed into the rusted metal box at the end of the drive. I sorted through them slowly, ads, bills, nothing unusual, until one thin envelope stopped me cold. The bank's logo glared up from the corner like a warning. I carried it inside, laid it flat on the table, and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The padlock key rested there too, exactly where I had set it last night, gleaming dully against the wood. I didn't know why I kept it in sight. Maybe because it reminded me of what I'd already locked away, and what was still hiding in plain sight. I slid the letter open. My hand stiffened as I read the charges. Hotel bills. Dinners. A jewelry purchase. All within the past 2 months. All charged to our joint account. I reread it, certain I was mistaken. But the numbers didn't lie. When she walked in minutes later, I didn't look up right away. I simply held the paper between my fingers, letting the silence draw her in. "What's that?" she asked, her tone casual, almost careless. "Explain this," I said, sliding the statement across the table toward her. She glanced at it once, then smirked. "You're making a fuss over nothing. Hotel charges?" My voice was low, controlled. "Dinner bills for 2? Jewelry?" She shrugged, sipping her coffee as though it were any ordinary morning. "So what? Maybe I went shopping. Maybe I stayed out. You think you're the only one who can spend? Not with my money." That drew a sharper look from her. "Our money." "No," I said, each word deliberate, "money I earned. Every dollar in that account came from my work, my years, my sweat. Yours too, once, but not lately. So tell me, who were you buying jewelry for?" She pushed the paper back toward me, dismissive. "You're imagining things again. Maybe you should get your eyes checked." The gaslighting hit harder than the bills themselves. To stand there, bold as brass, and deny the truth on the page, that was a deeper insult than the spending itself. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. My hand brushed against the key, cool and sharp beneath my palm. "You're paying for your sins with my money." Her smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "If you don't like it," she said softly, "leave." There it was again. The ultimatum, repeated. She thought she had me cornered. I rose slowly, gathering the letter and folding it into my pocket. "No," I said. "I think it's time you learned how quickly money disappears when it doesn't belong to you." Her eyes narrowed, confusion flickering for the first time. She tried to mask it with laughter, but it came out thin. "You wouldn't dare." I didn't answer. I walked into the study, the old desk where decades of paychecks had been sorted, bills signed, and sacrifices made. I sat down, placed the key beside me, and pulled the bank's number up on the phone. The operator confirmed my identity, asked for account details, and then her voice came clear and steady. "Would you like to freeze the joint accounts, sir?" My hand hovered over the receiver. I stared at the key, its notches catching the afternoon light. For years, I had unlocked every door for her, handed her every resource she asked for. But now, I would lock it all. "Yes," I said. "Effective immediately." And as the words left my mouth, I felt a weight lift, not from the key, not from the house, but from me. Evening settled heavy over the house, shadows stretching long across the living room. I was on my knees by the couch, searching for the remote that had slipped into the cushions. My hand brushed something cold, metal, unfamiliar. I pulled it free. A watch. Not mine. Not hers. A man's watch, thick leather strap, face scratched from wear. The initials on the back, HL, meant nothing to me, but the weight of it in my palm told me everything I needed to know. I stared at it for a long moment, the room spinning slowly around me. Then I set it down on the table, right beside the padlock key, as if the two belonged together, evidence and consequence. By the time she returned home, the table was set for dinner. I waited, calm on the outside, storm on the inside. She walked in, saw the watch resting there, and froze for half a heartbeat before schooling her face into indifference. "What's this?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, slipping off her coat. "How should I know? Maybe it's yours." "Mine?" I held it up. "You've seen my wrist every day for 20 years. You think I'd forget my own watch?" She sat down across from me, stabbing her fork into the salad without looking up. "You're overreacting again. Probably belongs to a friend who stopped by. A friend who leaves his watch under our couch cushions?" My voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the sheer absurdity of her denial. She smirked, still not meeting my eyes. "You sound paranoid." Before I could respond, footsteps echoed down the hall. Our daughter appeared, drawn by the tension. She was young enough to still believe in her mother's words, old enough to parrot them with conviction. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing between us. I held up the watch. "Found this under the couch. Do you recognize it?" She frowned, shook her head. "No." "Why?" "Because it doesn't belong here. And your mother doesn't seem concerned about a strange man's things in our house." Her face hardened, jaw set. "You're always suspicious. Always accusing. Maybe it's you who's the problem." The words cut sharper than anything her mother had said. For a second, I just stared at her, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. My own blood, my own child, standing there with fire in her eyes, not at her mother, but at me. Her mother seized the moment. "See? Even she thinks you're imagining things." My hand found the key on the table. I lifted it, held it between us, then slammed it down beside the watch with a sharp crack. Both objects rattled against the wood, echoing through the room. "This house," I said, voice low and steady, "still opens with my hand. Not his." Silence followed, thick and suffocating. My daughter's eyes flickered with something, fear, maybe, or confusion, but then she looked back at her mother and straightened her shoulders. "You're being cruel," she said to me. "If you can't trust her, maybe you should be the one to leave." The ultimatum, repeated now through her mouth. It wasn't just my wife against me anymore. My daughter was with her. I stood slowly, staring at them both. The watch glinted on the table, the key beside it like a gavel calling judgment. For years, I had believed my sacrifices bought loyalty. Tonight, I learned they bought silence at best, and betrayal at worst. Neither spoke as I left the room. But their silence wasn't victory. It was collusion. And collusion always left evidence. The knock came just after noon, 3 sharp raps on the front door. I opened it to find her standing there, lips pressed into a hard line, and beside her, her cousin Martin. A lawyer by trade, but by reputation, a snake in a suit. He stepped in first, briefcase in hand, his cologne hitting before his voice. "William," he said smoothly, "we need a few minutes of your time." My wife followed, not meeting my eyes. She clutched a folder as though it held her freedom. I noticed the way her fingers dug into the cardboard, white knuckles betraying her calm exterior. We sat at the table. I stayed standing for a moment longer, the padlocked key warm in my pocket, before finally lowering myself into the chair. Martin wasted no time. He flipped open his briefcase, slid a stack of papers across the table. "These are divorce filings. Best to get things handled cleanly before matters complicate." The word hung in the air like smoke. I picked up the first sheet. My name was scrawled across the bottom in ink, except I hadn't signed anything. My chest tightened. "You're quick," I said quietly. "Quicker than I expected. But tell me, how did my signature get here without my hand on a pen?" Martin adjusted his tie. "A clerical error, perhaps. Nothing intentional." I laughed once, sharp, humorless. Clerical errors don't forge handwriting. My wife leaned forward, eyes cold. Just sign them properly this time. Make it easy. We both know this marriage is over. Her words landed like a slap. Not the end itself, I had felt that coming, but the casual cruelty of it. As though decades of my life could be reduced to a signature on cheap paper. Martin cleared his throat. It would be in your best interest to comply. If not, well, the court won't look kindly on a man your age, clinging to property he can't manage. I stared at him, then at her. Their confidence wasn't natural, it was rehearsed. This wasn't just a conversation. It was a trap, set days, maybe weeks, in advance. I pressed my hand against my pocket, feeling the edges of the key bite into my palm. The same key that had locked away her secret lover, the same key that reminded me of what was mine to protect. You think a few papers scare me? I asked softly. Martin's smile thinned. They're more than papers, William. They're the law. The law doesn't start with lies, I shot back, tapping the forged signature with my finger. For a moment, silence filled the room. Even she seemed unsettled, shifting slightly in her chair. But Martin quickly smoothed it over. Look, he said, softening his tone. Sign now, and you can walk away with dignity. Refuse, and things will get ugly. Allegations. Hearings. Do you really want neighbors whispering that you've lost your mind? There it was, the public fallout they were banking on. Not just legal humiliation, but social shame, whispered across fences and church pews. I leaned forward slowly, eyes locked on his. If you think I'll sign, you don't know me. The words came out calm, almost gentle, but they hit harder than any shout. I slid the papers back across the table without touching the pen he'd left beside them. Her eyes narrowed, Martin's jaw tightened. For the first time, their confidence cracked. They had expected compliance. What they found was resistance. By dawn the house was silent, but my mind wasn't. Sleep hadn't come, not after the divorce papers, not after Martin's smug voice echoing through my head. I sat at the small desk in the spare room, the padlock key beside me, its edges catching the pale morning light. For years it had unlocked only the shed, but now, in my mind, it had become something else, a reminder that locks don't just keep secrets in. They keep intruders out. I opened my laptop, the glow washing over the table. I spread the papers across the desk, bank statements, insurance policies, the mortgage details. Each sheet of paper felt like a battlefield map, every number a position to exploit. For 30 years, I had kept this family afloat. Paychecks gone before they cleared, bills handled quietly, debts paid without complaint. I had opened every financial door for them. Now it was time to shut them. The first move was simple. Mortgage payments. I logged into the account, my fingers steady on the keyboard. Their name sat beside mine, a chain I had carried too long. With one click, I cancelled the auto payment. Another click confirmed it. The system asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes," I whispered, the word loud in the empty room. The confirmation flashed on screen, a quiet execution. Somewhere in the near future, the first bounced notice would arrive at the house. Not mine anymore, hers. The second move, insurance. 2 cars, both under my name, both insured by me. A few keystrokes, and their coverage was gone. The click of the mouse sounded like a trigger pulled. By tomorrow, the cars would still sit in the driveway, but they'd be rolling on nothing but risk. The third move, the credit cards. I had let her and our daughter use my accounts for years, assuming trust was repayment enough. No longer. I removed their names, cut their access with a few strokes. The system refreshed, and for the first time in decades, the balance was mine alone. I sat back, exhaling slowly. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't oppressive. It was calm, like the stillness after a storm has passed, when you know the damage is behind you, but the consequences are still coming. I reached for the key, placed it beside the pen I had used to jot down notes. The two lay there together, gleaming faintly. For decades I had unlocked doors for her. Today, I closed them. Memories stirred, the sacrifices I'd made quietly, the promotions I'd passed up to stay close to home, the nights I'd gone without so they could have more. Every choice, every dollar, had been for them. And in return, I got forged signatures and whispered gossip. Not anymore. The phone rang mid-morning. Her number. I let it buzz, watched it vibrate across the desk, then fall silent. A second call came minutes later. Then a third. By noon, a voicemail landed. I played it once, leaning back in my chair. Her voice was sharp, panicked. "William, the bank says the mortgage payment didn't go through. What did you do? Call me back." I deleted it with a flick of my thumb. By evening, there were more. Her voice shifting from anger to desperation. "The insurance, why did they cancel? Do you know how dangerous this is?" Another one, "Dad, please, my card didn't work at the store. What's going on?" I listened to each, calm as stone. Then I erased them. For the first time in years, my silence had weight. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one scrambling to fix things. And as the sun set, I looked at the key resting on the desk, catching the last of the light. It no longer felt heavy. It felt like mine again. They didn't know it yet, but the storm had already broken. By Wednesday night, my phone had racked up more missed calls than I could count. I ignored them all, sitting in the silence of the motel room, the hum of the old air conditioner filling the void. The padlock key lay on the table in front of me, turning slowly between my fingers. Every call I didn't answer, every voicemail I deleted, made it feel lighter. But the silence didn't last. A pounding knock shook the thin motel door, rattling the frame. I stood slowly, slid the key onto the table, and walked over. Through the peephole, I saw them, my wife, her face red with fury, our daughter standing behind her, and the man. Him. The lover's jaw was clenched, his body tense, fists already balled as if violence was the only language he knew. My daughter looked pale, caught between anger and fear. I opened the door just enough to lean against the frame, blocking the entrance. "William," she snapped, shoving at the gap. "What the hell have you done?" I kept my voice calm. "Taken back what was mine." "You canceled the mortgage," she shouted, her voice shrill. "The insurance? The cards? You're destroying us. You destroyed us long before I touched a keyboard." The lover stepped forward, chest puffed, his eyes burning holes through me. "You think you're clever? Cutting us off? You're a pathetic old man clinging to scraps." I glanced at him, then at my daughter. "Is this who you defend now?" Her lips trembled, but she looked away. "Dad. Mom said you're overreacting. That you've lost it." I reached back, picked up the key from the table, and set it down again deliberately, the sound sharp against the wood. The gesture made the man shift, uneasy, as though he sensed it meant more than it looked. "Lost it?" I said. "No. I've found it. Control. Dignity. Freedom." My wife scoffed. "You call this dignity? Leaving your daughter without groceries? Leaving us without a roof?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear. "You had a roof. You let him crawl under it." The lover's face darkened. He pushed against the door with sudden force, his shoulder slamming into it. The cheap wood creaked, but I didn't move. "Next time," he growled, low and dangerous, "I won't just hide in your shed. Next time, it'll be you." My daughter gasped, her hand flying to his arm. "Stop it. Just stop." For the first time, the certainty in her eyes faltered. She looked at him, then at me, as though a veil had lifted slightly. My wife yanked her back, shielding her. "Don't listen to him," she hissed. "He's trying to poison you against us." But I saw it, just a flicker, but enough. Doubt. A crack in her loyalty. I straightened, pressing the door back against their weight. "You've already poisoned yourselves." Then I shut it hard, the latch snapping into place, their voices muffled instantly by the thin wall. I leaned my back against the door, breathing evenly. On the table, the key glinted faintly in the motel's dim light. Not heavy this time, not angry, steady. It had become my quiet defiance, a weapon that needed no swinging, only silence and timing. The shouting outside grew fainter as they finally left. But I knew this wasn't over. Their desperation had just begun. And desperation always made people dangerous. Sunday morning, the town gathered at the church the way it always had. Bells rang, children tugged on parents' coats, hymns floated faintly through the air. On the surface, nothing had changed. But when I walked through the doors, heads turned. Whispers stirred like dry leaves. I felt the weight of the padlock key in my pocket, its ridges pressing into my palm as I slipped into a pew near the back. My silence had spoken louder than words all week. Now, the community was beginning to answer. Two men in front leaned toward each other. I caught fragments, mortgage bounced, not like William, she must be spending. Another voice behind me, he carried them for years. Maybe it's true. The words weren't aimed at me, but they hit all the same. Except this time, they didn't sting. They steadied me. Halfway through the sermon, I felt the air shift. She arrived. My wife, walking with deliberate steps, our daughter trailing close, and him, his face tight with hostility, collar turned up as though it could shield him from the stares. The whispers grew louder, a wave rolling across the pews. She sat near the front, her back straight, chin lifted. And then, as though she couldn't stand the murmurs any longer, she rose. "I need to speak," she announced, her voice carrying. The pastor hesitated, but before he could object, she turned to the congregation. "You've heard rumors. Lies. My husband, he's losing his mind. He's been vindictive, cutting us off, leaving his own family with nothing. You've all seen how paranoid he's become." Murmurs swelled. Some faces looked uncertain. Others skeptical. She glanced around, feeding on the attention, mistaking silence for support. I stood slowly. Every eye shifted back to me. "Lies," I said, calm but loud enough to cut through the whispers. "Not mine. His." I pointed toward the man beside her. "The lover." His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. That's when the banker, Mr. Callahan, cleared his throat from across the aisle. A man respected in this town, his voice carried weight. He held up a folder, papers crisp inside. "I wasn't going to speak," he said, "but since this is out in the open," he glanced at me, then back at the congregation. "This man, Harry, came into my office last month. He tried to take out a loan. 50,000. Against William's property. With documents bearing a signature that wasn't his." The church went still. My daughter's face drained of color. My wife's lips parted, but no words came. Harry shifted uncomfortably, anger flashing across his features. "Forgery," Callahan continued, his voice steady. "Clear as day." I turned him away, but I kept the record. He lifted the papers slightly. "It's all here." Gasps spread through the pews. Someone muttered, "So it's true." Another whispered, "She knew, she must have known." I kept my hand on the key in my pocket, steadying myself. For once, the weight wasn't a burden. It was balance. My wife tried to recover, her voice trembling. "That's not," he's lying. But the murmurs drowned her out. For the first time, the tide wasn't with her. It was against. Harry surged to his feet, pointing a finger at me across the pews. You think this changes anything? You think they'll save you? I'll ruin you, old man. You hear me? Gasps rippled through the room. The pastor stepped forward, raising a hand. This is a house of God. But Harry's voice thundered over him. Next time, I won't knock. Next time, I'll take what's mine. The crowd recoiled. My daughter stared at him, horrified, as though seeing him clearly for the first time. I slipped the key deeper into my pocket, closing my hand tight around it. His threats no longer shook me. They confirmed what I already knew: desperation makes dangerous men. As the congregation erupted into whispers, one thought cut through all the noise. They had shown their hand. And I wasn't finished playing mine. The morning after the church fiasco, I walked into Mr. Callahan's office not as a customer, but as a man arming himself for war. The old banker greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes sharp with quiet respect. He had seen Harry's outburst, heard my wife's lies crumble under the weight of proof. "William," he said, gesturing me toward a chair, "I think it's time you stop playing defense." I sat down, pulling a folder from under my arm. Inside, the fraudulent mortgage attempts, the forged signature on those divorce papers, the bank statements riddled with her charges. The padlock key clinked softly as I set it beside the folder, like a sentinel guarding the truth. Callahan opened the folder carefully, flipping through each sheet. His expression never wavered, but when he looked back up, there was no doubt in his voice. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud. And fraud can burn them both to the ground. I don't want ashes, I said quietly. I want them out of my life. Out of my home. Then we'll start with two things. He leaned back, fingers steepled. A restraining order, for harassment and threats. And an eviction. If your house is still in your name, you can reclaim it. Legally. Permanently. The words landed like a hammer. For weeks, I had been on my heels, enduring insults, ultimatums, betrayal. But now, for the first time, I felt the ground shift beneath me, not against me, but under my control. Callahan slid a pen across the desk. I'll prepare the filings. All you need to do is sign. I stared at the pen for a moment. The last time someone had pushed papers in front of me, they were forged with my name. This time, my signature would be real, and it would carry weight. I picked up the key, pressed it lightly against the pen, the two objects crossing like weapons laid side by side. Then I signed. Every stroke of ink felt like unlocking a door that had been sealed too long. Callahan gathered the papers swiftly. I'll have the sheriff serve them tomorrow. Once he does, they'll have no choice. They leave, or they face charges. I exhaled, steady and slow. The silence in the office wasn't oppressive. It was purposeful. For the first time, I wasn't the hunted man. I was the one setting traps. As I rose to leave, Callahan rested a hand on my arm. William, dignity isn't just surviving what they've done. It's forcing them to answer for it. You've already begun. Outside, the town buzzed with midday activity. But when I stepped onto the street, I didn't feel the stares like before. People nodded. One man tipped his hat. The shift was subtle, but it was there, the community had seen, and now they knew. That evening, back in my motel room, I set the folder and the key side by side on the table. The folder held the law. The key held memory. Together, they felt like the balance I had been searching for. When the phone rang again, her number flashing, I didn't answer. Instead, I whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow, you'll understand what real loss feels like." And I knew I meant it. The sheriff didn't hesitate. By noon the next day, the papers had been served, restraining order for him, eviction notice for her. It was official now, black ink on white pages. Their bravado couldn't erase the law. I waited quietly in the motel room, the padlock key rolling slow between my fingers. For days it had felt heavy, but now it spun easily, light as air. Because weight, I realized, only drags you down when you're the one carrying it. Today, they were carrying it. The first cracks came fast. By evening, word reached me through a friend at the bank. Her credit cards had been declined at the grocery store. She had stormed out, leaving a cart of food abandoned in the aisle. People saw. People whispered. The second crack, louder. Debt collectors showed up at the house. She had signed her name onto bills she thought I'd always cover. Without my hand holding everything up, the structure collapsed. And the lover? His mask slipped too. I heard from Callahan again. Harry had shown up at his workplace, red-faced and shouting, trying to defend himself. But his boss already knew. The forgery, the public outburst in church, it spread fast in a small town. By the end of the week, he was escorted off the property. Fired. For years they had strutted like peacocks on the feathers of my labor. Now, stripped bare, they looked exactly as they were, ordinary, weak, and desperate. But the deepest crack didn't come from banks or jobs. It came from her. Our daughter. She came to me that night, outside the motel, her eyes rimmed red. She stood in the doorway, hesitant, as though she didn't belong there. Dad, her voice was small, fragile. Can I sit? I nodded. She perched on the edge of the bed, wringing her hands. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence stretched, the hum of the air conditioner filling it. Finally, she whispered, "He lied to me too." I looked at her, waiting. "He said you were cruel," she continued, tears streaking her cheeks. "He said you'd abandoned us, that Mom was the victim." I believed him. I believed her. But now. I saw him today. He screamed at Mom in front of me. He called me a burden. He said he only stayed for the money. For what you gave. Her words cracked, breaking like thin glass. I'm so sorry. For a moment, I didn't move. I only twirled the key between my fingers, the metal catching the dim motel light. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Sorry doesn't erase choices, I said. But it means you see them for what they were. She covered her face with her hands. I thought I was protecting her. I thought you were the problem. But it was all lies. He doesn't love her. He never loved us. Her body shook with sobs. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her close, but I didn't. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't a gift you hand out like spare change. It's earned, slowly, painfully. You saw the truth, I said finally, the key spinning once more before resting still in my palm. That's the first step. What you do with it, that's the rest. She nodded through her tears, unable to speak. But in her silence, I saw the shift. Loyalty had broken. Doubt had taken root. And guilt was blooming fast. Outside, the night pressed close against the thin motel curtains. The world had grown quieter, but not in the way it had weeks ago. This silence wasn't empty. It was the calm before the next storm. And as I pocketed the key, I knew, I was ready for it. By the weekend, the gossip had stopped being whispers. It had become conversation. I walked into Miller's diner, the bell above the door jingling the way it always had. Only this time, the air shifted the second I stepped inside. Heads turned. Some nodded, others simply watched. The low murmur of talk dipped, then rose again, but now I caught the words: forgery, eviction, mortgage, betrayal. I slid into a booth by the window, ordered black coffee, and let the silence settle around me. The padlock key sat in my pocket, cool against my palm, a steady reminder that I didn't need to speak for truth to defend itself. The door opened behind me. Voices stiffened. I didn't need to look to know it was them. My wife swept in first, chin high, lips pursed in defiance. The lover followed, his jaw set, his hand on her shoulder as though possession could replace respect. My daughter trailed behind, her eyes downcast, refusing to meet mine. The room froze for a heartbeat. Then, as they walked toward a booth, the conversations began again, this time louder, pointed. She drained him dry. Forgery, can you believe it? And still walks around like a queen. She heard it too. Her shoulders stiffened, her face tightened. She sat quickly, forcing a smile at the waitress who barely returned it. Across the room, Pastor Lewis rose slowly from his seat. He wasn't a man of many words outside the pulpit, but when he spoke, the diner hushed. Truth doesn't need defense, he said, looking directly at her. Then he glanced toward me. It defends itself. The words landed like a verdict. Conversation swelled again, this time not whispers but open condemnation. My wife tried to mask her fear with laughter. This town is pathetic, she hissed to the man beside her. All of them sheep. But even my daughter looked pained, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She could feel the tide turning. I reached into my pocket, drew out the key, and set it gently on the table in front of me. The small sound it made, a soft metallic tap, cut through the clatter of plates and cups. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Some eyes caught it, followed the gesture, and I saw understanding dawn. The key wasn't just mine, it had become a symbol. Of what I locked away. Of what I reclaimed. Of who truly held control. And then, as though he couldn't stand the weight of silence any longer, the lover snapped. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. You think this means anything? He shouted, pointing at me across the room. You think papers and gossip can stop me? The diner fell silent. Even the waitress froze mid-step. You're an old man clinging to scraps, he bellowed, his face red, his voice raw. I'll take what I want. I'll take her, I'll take the house, I'll take everything you think you own. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, he's lost it. My daughter shrank back against the booth, horrified. My wife reached for his arm, but he shook her off violently. I didn't rise. I didn't shout. I simply kept my hand on the key, steady, unmoved. Because I knew, his rage wasn't strength. It was collapse. And the whole town was watching it happen. The morning after the diner eruption, I sat in Mr. Callahan's office again, the folder of evidence thick and heavy on his desk. He had already arranged a meeting with a lawyer friend, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, the kind of man who could slice through lies with a single glance. William, he said, adjusting his glasses, I've seen plenty of fraud. But this, he tapped the forged deed, the false loan application, and the divorce papers, this is a tapestry of crime. And it wasn't done by accident. It was done with knowledge. With intent. I leaned forward. You mean she knew? He nodded slowly. Not only knew. She signed supporting affidavits. Look here. He pulled a sheet from the folder, pointing to a signature at the bottom. My wife's handwriting, unmistakable. Not just present, but complicit. She had stood beside him in the fraud. I felt the air leave my lungs, but not from shock. From confirmation. The whispers, the rumors, the watch, the bills, all of it led here. And now, in black ink, was proof. The padlock key sat on the table beside the folder. I picked it up, pressed its edge against the paper until it left a faint indentation, as if sealing the truth into the fibers. She knew, I repeated. The lawyer's voice was steady. That means she's not just guilty of betrayal. She's guilty of conspiracy. And that, William, gives you leverage. Leverage. For weeks, I had been the one cornered, pressed into defense. But now, the word fit like armor. File it, I said. All of it. Fraud, conspiracy, forgery. Let them stand in court and explain themselves. The lawyer nodded, already pulling forms from his briefcase. And the will? He asked. I had thought about that moment for nights, lying awake in the motel, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, the key cold in my hand. My daughter's tearful apology still rang in my ears. She had been fooled, yes, but she had also chosen her side until it broke her. Forgiveness might come someday. But trust, no. Trust was locked. Remove them, I said flatly. Both of them. She gets nothing. He gets nothing. And she, I paused, thinking of my daughter, her face pale with regret. She will have to live with the choice she made. The inheritance goes elsewhere. To whom? Charity, I said after a moment. Veterans. People who know sacrifice. People who won't spit on it. The pen slid into my hand. I signed with deliberate strokes, each letter cutting deeper than any argument I could ever have shouted. When I finished, I placed the key on top of the papers. The sound rang sharp in the quiet office, like a gavel striking wood. This, I said softly, is the door closing. By afternoon, the filings were official. Lawsuit. Will. Everything. Copies sealed, notarized, sent to court. When I walked out of that building, the sky seemed clearer than it had in months. The gossiping neighbors on the street didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked with something else, respect. A nod here, a murmured greeting there. The shift was undeniable. By evening, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't her voice on the line. It was a clerk from the courthouse. Your case has been accepted. Court date is set. The final step had begun. I set the phone down, twirled the key between my fingers once more, and whispered, "Your time is up." The courthouse loomed gray against the morning sky, its stone steps slick from a night of rain. People gathered in small clusters near the entrance, murmuring about the case that had already become the talk of the town. I climbed the steps slowly, the padlock key in my pocket, heavy but steady. Today, it would speak louder than I ever could. Dad. Her voice stopped me halfway up. My daughter stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She looked smaller than I remembered, a child again rather than a woman. The weight of her choices pressed down on her frame. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "Can we talk before it starts?" I nodded once, and we moved to the side, beneath the courthouse columns. The air smelled of damp stone and wet leaves. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Tears welled, slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't know. I swear, Dad. I didn't know it went that far. I thought," she broke off, clutching at her chest. "I thought Mom was the victim. I thought he loved her. But I was wrong. About all of it." Her voice cracked into a sob. "I betrayed you. I stood with them when I should have stood with you. And now I don't know how to fix it." I listened in silence, the key warm in my pocket, my thumb brushing its ridges. Finally, I drew it out, holding it between us. "This," I said quietly, "was just metal once. A tool. Then it became something else, a lock, a secret, a defense. Now it's the proof of one truth: trust can be given once. Only once. After that, it has to be earned." I placed the key in her hand. She clutched it like it was the last lifeline she'd ever hold. Her tears fell on the cold metal. "Dad, please," she begged. "Give me a chance. I'll prove it. I'll make it right. Just, don't cut me out of your life completely." For a long moment, I let her hold it. I saw the hope flicker in her eyes, fragile and desperate. Then, slowly, I pulled it back, slipping it into my pocket once more. Her face crumpled. "Trust isn't given back," I said softly, my voice low but firm. "It's earned. And you haven't earned it yet." She covered her mouth with her hand, sobs racking her frame. But she didn't argue. She knew. The truth was already carved deep into her. Behind us, the heavy courthouse doors swung open. My wife stood there, composed as ever, lips curved into a smug smile. "Pathetic," she sneered at our daughter. "Begging won't change anything. He'll still lose." I looked at her, calm, steady. "We'll see who loses." The bailiff's voice carried over the steps. "Case of William Hart versus Harriet and Harry, court is now in session." The crowd stirred, pressing closer to the doors. The air felt thick with anticipation. I straightened, the key secure in my pocket once more. My daughter still wept quietly beside me, but I couldn't hold her yet. Not until she proved herself. The time for words had passed. The verdict was waiting. The courtroom smelled of old wood and dust, the kind of place where time itself seemed to hold its breath. I sat at the plaintiff's table, the padlock key heavy in my pocket, my fingers brushing it like a touchstone. Across from me, she sat with her lawyer cousin at her side, her face tight with forced composure. Beside her, Harry shifted restlessly, his eyes wild, his shirt collar damp with sweat. The judge entered, gavel striking once. The sound echoed like thunder, silencing the murmurs in the gallery. The community had come, neighbors, co-workers, even the pastor from church. Every seat was filled. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. My lawyer stood first. He presented the documents carefully, each one sliding onto the table before the judge. Forged deeds. False loan applications. Divorce papers with a signature that wasn't mine. And then, the affidavits, signed in her handwriting, binding her to the fraud. Each page was a nail in their coffin. Each word, a weight dragging them down. The judge's expression grew darker with every sheet. When he finally looked up, his voice was cold. "Mrs. Hart, did you sign these documents knowingly?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked to Harry, then to Martin, her cousin, but neither offered rescue. Martin stared at the floor, silent. Harry's jaw twitched, rage simmering, but even he couldn't conjure a lie strong enough to cover this. I thought," she stammered, but the judge cut her off. "Fraud isn't a thought. It's a crime." The gallery erupted with murmurs. Some gasped, others shook their heads. I caught the eyes of a neighbor who had once pitied me. Now, he nodded slowly, respect clear on his face. Harry couldn't hold his tongue any longer. He shot to his feet, pointing across the courtroom. "This old man ruined us. He took everything." The judge's gavel cracked down. "Sit, or I'll have you removed." Harry sneered, but the bailiff's glare forced him back into his seat. His collapse was complete, and everyone could see it. Then my lawyer delivered the final strike, the will. He laid it on the table, crisp and final. "Your Honor," he said, "Mr. Hart has amended his estate. Neither defendant is included. All assets will instead be donated to veterans' charities." The words hit harder than any verdict. My wife's face crumbled, disbelief painted across it. My daughter, sitting behind her, buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. I didn't look away. This was the cost of betrayal. The judge delivered his ruling: eviction upheld, restraining order permanent, fraud charges forwarded for criminal trial. It was done. As